Hello, everybody, and welcome back to TLC's Sister Wives Secrets. I'm Olivia, and if you care about truth, justice, and what's really happening behind the reality TV curtain, then hit that subscribe button and give this episode a thumbs up. Because today, we're not just talking drama, we're confronting a heartbreaking moment that's shaken the Sister Wives world to its core. When Garrison Brown died, fans around the world wept alongside his mother, his siblings, and every viewer who had watched this kind, funny, and quietly hurting young man grow up on our screens. But what should have been a sacred, private goodbye, his funeral, has now become the epicenter of one of the most painful and controversial chapters in the entire Sister Wives saga. Because according to insiders, eyewitness accounts, and fan observations, Kody and Robyn Brown's actions at Garrison's funeral didn't just spark outrage. They exposed something deeper, something darker, a lack of empathy, a tone deafness, a need for control that went so far it shattered the very last threads of goodwill anyone had left for them. From arriving against the family's wishes, to reportedly bringing a TLC camera crew, to engaging in what many considered an inappropriate public display of affection at the funeral of their estranged son, it became clear this wasn't about grief, it was about power. Fans were horrified, family members were stunned, and as the dust settled, one undeniable truth remained. This moment, this funeral, marked the final moral collapse of Kody and Robyn Brown's credibility. Whatever illusions remained about their role as parents, as partners, as protectors of the family, were buried with Garrison. In this episode, we're going to break down exactly what happened. From the shocking funeral tension to the defensive, evasive behavior in the season 19 tell-all, we'll trace the unraveling of a man who once claimed to be the spiritual leader of his family and a woman whose tears now raise more questions than answers. So buckle in, secret keepers. Because the truth? It's no longer hiding in plain sight. It's screaming through the silence of a son's final goodbye. It was supposed to be a moment of peace, a time for silence, remembrance, and sacred grief. Garrison Brown's funeral was held in Flagstaff, quiet, somber, and devastating. The kind of event no mother should ever have to plan. Janelle sat front and center, shattered, surrounded by her children. There were no speeches for cameras, no grandstanding, just family, just heartbreak, just love, until Kody and Robyn showed up. Now let's be clear. Multiple sources, including closely followed fan accounts and insider leaks, reported that Kody and Robyn were not invited by the family to attend. This wasn't just a personal slight. This was about emotional safety, about honoring Garrison's memory on his mother's terms. Because in the final years of his life, Garrison had been painfully clear. He did not want a relationship with his father. He was hurt, he was rejected, and he was vocal about it. So when Kody and Robyn arrived at the funeral anyway, and worse, reportedly brought a TLC camera crew, the atmosphere shifted. A funeral meant for healing suddenly felt like a reality TV intrusion, and for many fans, it felt like a final betrayal. But what really pushed people over the edge? The PDA. Yes. During the funeral for their estranged son, Kody was seen embracing and stroking Robyn in a manner many viewers called inappropriate and attention-seeking. On Reddit and fan groups, the reaction was swift and furious. It was like they were comforting each other, not mourning Garrison, one fan wrote. Another said, they made it about their image, not about his life. And then came the unspoken, unbearable question, were they even grieving, or were they performing? Meanwhile, Janelle sat alone in her devastation. Her boys flanked her, broken but strong. The rawness in her eyes, her hands clutching photos of Garrison, told the real story. A mother who lost her child. A family who knew this pain wasn't for the public consumption. And yet, Kody and Robyn inserted themselves anyway, wearing grief like a costume, playing their roles while the people who actually raised and loved Garrison were left to navigate the wreckage. This wasn't just awkward. It wasn't just bad optics, it was an emotional ambush, and it sent shockwaves, not just through the Brown family, but through an entire fandom that had finally seen just how far Kody and Robyn were willing to go to control the story. The dust hadn't even settled before the emotional consequences of that funeral appearance began to ripple outward. Behind the scenes, the fractures that had been quietly splintering the Brown family for years cracked wide open. Let's start with Janelle. This wasn't just the funeral of her child. It was the funeral of what little hope remained that her ex-husband might step up, show grace, or even understand the gravity of what had happened. And as he wept, Robyn comforted him, her hands on his shoulders, her voice soft and rehearsed. It was déjà vu from the funeral all over again, Kody and Robyn creating a private moment for the cameras, while the real pain of the family remained off-screen, ignored. Viewers weren't buying it. Reddit exploded. "This isn't grief, this is performance," one user posted. "He's weaponizing his son's death to make himself look better," said another. The backlash was immediate, intense, and almost universally aligned. Kody had crossed a moral line, because at its core, this wasn't just about bad parenting anymore. This was about image control in the face of tragedy, about a man who had spent years ignoring the Maddie, for instance, didn't attend Garrison's funeral just to say goodbye. She stood as a quiet symbol of protest. She didn't make a scene. She didn't shout, but she also didn't pretend. And when she paid tribute to her brother on social media, the message was clear. Garrison was loved. He was seen. And his loss mattered, not just as Kody's son, but as a human being whose pain had been ignored. In many ways, Garrison's death became the line in the sand. It forced everyone, on camera and off, to confront the emotional neglect that had long been hidden behind the show's upbeat facade. And for the viewers, it was a wake-up call too. We weren't just watching a polygamous family struggle. We were watching a toxic, patriarchal system implode, live on national television. And now, the younger generation isn't just surviving it, they're dismantling it. As of now, Kody's relationship with most of his children is fractured, if not severed. And the more he appears on TV trying to defend himself, the more isolated he becomes, not just from his kids, but from the audience. Because silence in the face of injustice is not neutrality, it's alignment. Silence while Garrison was being ignored by his father. Silence when Gabriel cried on national television. Silence as Kody raged at Christine. Silence when the funeral became a spectacle. This is the cost of quiet complicity. This is what happens when you confuse loyalty with righteousness. And while Robyn may still hope for reconciliation, the people she once called family are building something else without her. Boundaries, healing, and a future without secrets. The cracks we saw forming over the last decade have finally split wide open. No more pretending. No more staged family gatherings or carefully worded TLC interviews. The emotional collapse of the Brown family is no longer a subplot. It's the entire story. We watched it unfold piece by piece. When Christine walked away, it was the first real rupture. Her voice shook, but her eyes were clear. She was done. And in leaving, she opened a door the others were too afraid to unlock. Then came Janelle, always the steady one, always the bridge between kids and father. But even she couldn't withstand the storm. The way Kody spoke to her, dismissed her, and ultimately blamed her for the collapse of his paternal relationships. It wasn't just disrespect, it was betrayal. And Meri, the one who held on the longest, who begged for love and was met with rejection over and over again. Her estrangement was quiet, but it was no less painful. When she finally walked away, it wasn't with fanfare. It was with decades of scars we all saw coming. But it's the children's rejection, their clarity, their silence, their boundaries, that seals this collapse as permanent. Janelle's boys, especially Garrison and Gabrielle, were once proud sons, loyal, loving, and Kody cast them aside for questioning his choices. He chose obedience over connection. He chose Robyn's comfort over his son's emotional survival. Christine's daughters, especially Mykelti and Isabel, saw it all. They remember the hospital abandonment, the favoritism, the division, and they haven't forgotten. They've built new lives with Christine and David, far from Kody's version of family. And let's not forget Leon, Meri's only child, who has quietly but firmly drawn their own lines of protection, choosing distance over dysfunction. The wounds are not just emotional, they are generational. They are irreversible, and they are visible now to anyone watching with open eyes. What used to be framed as a family in transition has now become a cautionary tale about control, patriarchy, and the price of silence. Because this wasn't just a TV moment. It wasn't just another season finale or headline for the tabloids. This was real. A funeral where lines were drawn in grief, a family that couldn't come together to honor one of their own, a father who lost the respect of the very children he helped bring into this world. And for every fan who has cried, raged, or mourned while watching these stories unfold, you're not alone. The truth is, we weren't just watching a show. We were witnessing survivors find their voices. We were seeing women walk out of emotional captivity. We were watching children choose. Garrison had died estranged from his father, and rather than respecting that boundary, Kody made the day about himself. Janelle had reportedly asked that the service be private. No outsiders, no cameras, just love, grief, and closure. Instead, what she got was a media stunt disguised as mourning, and in that moment, watching Kody cradle Robyn while her son was being laid to rest, Janelle wasn't just grieving Garrison. She was grieving the death of any illusion that Kody would ever be accountable. The fallout didn't stop with her. Gabe was livid. Sources say his anger wasn't quiet. It was volcanic. Remember, he and Garrison were close. They were roommates, brothers in arms, and both had felt the sting of their father's cold rejection during COVID and beyond. Now, to see that same man, the one who ignored their texts and refused to mend fences, show up at the funeral like a grieving patriarch, it was too much. The tension among the siblings, many of whom had already begun distancing themselves from Kody and Robyn, escalated sharply. Some refused to even make eye contact with Kody. Others reportedly left early. For many of the kids, that funeral was a turning point. Not just in their relationship with their father, but with the entire idea of family. And what about Christine? Though no longer spiritually married to Kody, she remained deeply connected to the family, especially Janelle and her children. She showed up in support, quiet and respectful, there for Janelle and the boys. But behind her composed exterior was a storm of emotion. As someone who had spent decades witnessing Kody's patterns, this wasn't surprising to her, but it was enraging. To watch him co-opt grief for his own narrative was the final confirmation that leaving had been the right decision, that this man would never change. Even Meri, though often left on the sidelines of family dynamics, reportedly expressed sadness and disbelief over what had happened. For once, all three ex-wives stood united, emotionally, if not physically, in their shared disappointment. As for Kody and Robyn, they left the funeral under a cloud of whispered disgust. Fans who attended described the air as thick with judgment, chilled, and unforgiving. Whatever sympathy remained for Kody seemed to evaporate that day. And though TLC hasn't released formal footage of the funeral itself, the implications were everywhere in the tell-all. Kody grew defensive, erratic, and evasive when asked about the last time he showed public affection with Robyn. Most viewers believe he was referencing the funeral without ever saying it out loud, but the internet saw through him. Fan theories exploded. Reddit threads lit up. They made the funeral about them, one post read, garnering thousands of likes. Others went further, calling it the most shameful moment in the history of sister wives, an irreversible blow to Kody's already crumbling image. The fallout was emotional, personal, permanent. For many members of the Brown family, this wasn't just a betrayal. It was confirmation. Confirmation that Kody Brown wasn't just a failed father or husband. He was now, in their eyes, a man who had lost the moral right to call himself family. And that wound, it may never heal. If fans were hoping for an ounce of self-awareness or even a sliver of humility from Kody Brown and the sister wives, one-on-one tell-all, they were in for a bitter disappointment. Because instead of grief, we got gaslighting. When the topic of Garrison's passing came up, the air in the studio changed. Even Sukanya Krishnan, the seasoned host of the tell-alls, seemed to tiptoe around Kody, perhaps unsure of how far to push. But viewers, they were ready. They wanted answers, real answers, not rehearsed sympathy, not crocodile tears. Just the truth. Why did this man let his son die estranged from him? And how did Kody respond? With rage, with deflection, with blame. He turned his pain into a weapon, lashing out at the very children who were mourning their brother. They ganged up on me, he claimed. They were disobedient. He described Garrison's rebellion as if it had been personal, as if being an autonomous adult who rejected authoritarian control was some kind of moral failure. And when asked if he had tried to reach out to his sons before the tragedy, he stammered, shifted, and blamed Janelle. Let's be clear. There was no acceptance of responsibility, no acknowledgement of the cold shoulder he had turned during the pandemic, or the way he isolated himself with Robyn while the rest of his children were left in emotional exile. Instead, he painted himself as the victim, a man misunderstood by his own offspring, weaponizing his grief to deflect from decades of emotional abandonment. But what sent fans absolutely reeling was Kody's breakdown over how he was suffering. Not Garrison, not Janelle, not Gabe, him. He claimed he was deeply wounded by the way his children had rejected him. He cried not for the loss of his son, but for